One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. A little week 13 survive in advance Saturday, guys. Season's hanging the balance, quite frankly, on the slate that we've been given this week. I know everybody's trying to get their shots in about the SEC having their annual bye week in November, but listen, the Big Ten doesn't exactly have meaningful games going on outside of one Eugene, Oregon. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about head coaching searches. One of them just came to a conclusion in Blacksburg. We've got Lane Kiffin rumors. A lot to get into tonight, guys, as well as obviously our primetime slates, our whip around the standings. I mean, it's getting messy in some of the conferences. It's getting more and more clear in others. So I guess let's start here. Like, what are you expecting to get out of this weekend? Is there a storyline? Is there kind of something that you're looking for in week 13? Because it really feels like we've got teams that will either make the playoffs or not based off of the result this week.
Yeah, I'm looking to see who's focused because, like you mentioned, obviously the SEC kind of builds in this bye week. We don't have to go deeply into that. I do have some thoughts on that Big Ten slate when we get there. But looking to see who's focused, looking to see who doesn't let wins from last week carry over into a hangover to this week, and maybe who doesn't let big rivalry games next week block the goal for this week, right? Because there's a lot to be had, just like you said. Lots to be decided on the field this week, even if some of the top teams aren't playing the best competition. Those back half of that playoff field feels wide open still, and a lot of that is going to be decided this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at not just focus, but also like who's going to make a statement, right? Like as we're coming up on the end of the season and the playoff committee's got to decide who's going to be those last couple of teams getting the at-large bids. There's going to be some teams that have to convince the committee to put them in, right? And there's going to be a lot of recency bias in that. And well, remember what they did a couple weeks ago and then fill in the blank. Somebody's going to play their way in, and probably somebody's going to play their way out this weekend.
I think that's a great point. I think that's going to come top of mind when we get to our game of the week here in just a minute. But guys, first, let's talk about the coaching news that's going on around the country. This coaching report brought to you, first of all, by our Substack, because I did update our head coaching dartboard. So if you want to check us out, 3techpod/Substack is where you can find us. But it's also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Use our code 3techpod for 100% cash matching. They're still doing that. And for a $100 bonus play when you play your first $5 lineup. So, Trey, I think you've had some more luck than I have as of late. Last week was not my week, but that's okay. We're still rolling along with college football. NFL is going on. We've got Monday Night Football going on as we're recording this. I think basically in the time that it took for us to get through our intro, the Cowboys have already gone 3 and out. So that's fun. You can do whatever you want with those plays, but just use our code 3techpod for that bonus offer. And I think we have to start at the top with James Franklin going to Virginia Tech. This feels like, guys, the only perfect match that I think you're going to find in the coaching carousel this year. When I started putting together that dartboard and looking through the coaching candidates and where they might fit, James Franklin to Virginia Tech felt very natural. And sure enough, the Hokies have got their man as of this afternoon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You just talk about knowledge of the area, history in that area. A guy that knows how to win a lot of football games and didn't get over the hump at Penn State, could never win the biggest of big games. But guess what? In the ACC, he's not going to have to play Ohio State and Michigan every single year. He's not going to have to find a way to beat a team like Oregon every single year. There's going to be some big out-of-conference matchups, I'm sure, but in conference play, you're talking about a Miami team that can never seem to get out of their own way, a Clemson team that seems like they're on the way down under Dabo Swinney, and a bunch of really plucky, solid for a couple of years teams, but not a lot of staying power in the rest of that conference. So if he can build what he did at Virginia Tech, right? If he can build a 9 to 10 win program like he did at Penn State, that's going to be at the top of the ACC every single year and fighting for a spot in the college football playoff. So absolutely right. I think he's going to do a great job getting talent there. Home run hire for Virginia Tech.
I wrote in the Dartboard article that Virginia Tech felt like an amazing spot for all of those reasons, but also because Virginia Tech is not in the win a national championship at all cost mode, right? They have not crested the 8-win mark since, I believe it's 2017. So it's been a little bit since they've been nationally relevant at the end of the year. And James Franklin is a guy that can do that. He is, I think, the Matt Rule of a slightly bigger brand, I want to say. Franklin's done it at Vanderbilt. He's obviously gotten Penn State through some really tough times and got them a drive away from a national championship, or at least playing for one. So I think this is a perfect fit for Virginia Tech. Penn State also negotiated his buyout down to just $9 million on their end. We don't know what his contract is quite yet in Blacksburg. At least I haven't seen it as of time of recording. It feels like a win-win for both parties on that front. We can talk about Penn State here in a minute as well, because I feel like they're really going to get left out in the cold. But Garrett, for Virginia Tech, they've got hope for the first time in quite some time. I know, what was it, 2 years ago, they were kind of hoping to be in the playoff, but you were squinting. It was a lot of projecting. You know that James Franklin is going to come in. He's going to have Lane Stadium rocking every single weekend. And Trey's right. Like, all of these opponents are going to be right on level with what Virginia Tech is going to trot out there every single week. Like, why not James Franklin?
Yeah, and when you were mentioning, just a minute ago, not having that 8-win mark, that also comes along with one bowl game victory in like the last decade. And so
Nice.
when you're thinking about how bad the football product has been there for the last, like decade and a half, it hasn't really been all that good. I think this is really exciting to think about the possibilities and what could happen under James Franklin, right? Like, I mean, the thing for him was the pressure of the big game and the big stage and everything else up there at, Penn State. Well, hey, if you're just knocking out some bowl game victories for the first couple years while you grow and build your roster and, try to win through the portal and win through recruiting in that area, I think you're going to win some good graces, right? I think at this point, Virginia Tech fans are just sitting there saying, hey, we'd like to have another good product that we can root for. Love to find a way to just kind of, put some wins in the win column and see if we can't, maybe build towards eventually maybe building towards championships, right? You don't want to just stay in the, hey, we can win some bowl games forever, right? But, if it's a couple of years of, moderate to even pretty decent success, then yeah, I think they'll give him a few years to build up that roster, to build up what he needs and the resources and the infrastructure around the program and everything else so that he can start to compete. And also the other big thing about this is, yeah, like the ACC, not exactly the juggernaut conference to try to win in right now. Clemson kind of taking a step back in the last couple of years from their kind of dominance. We can't really trust Miami on a year in and year out basis. There's lots of really good teams that haven't quite gotten to the top yet. This is a good time to jump in and try to throw your hat in the ring.
One of the interesting notes on the state of Penn State, where I have a couple of thoughts, is the recruiting decommitment wave hit Penn State hard after James Franklin left. I believe they're up to 17 decommits from that class, whereas you look at LSU, who's lost one. Arkansas, I believe, had one kid decommit, and then he recommitted like 2 weeks later. So we've seen high school athletes, and I think it's probably because of NIL, kind of hold firm. And if they've negotiated deals with the schools that they're committed to, I think you're starting to see them maybe act a little bit more like adults, right? And taking the sure thing. I've got kind of this hay in the barn. Let me go ahead and go collect that. At Penn State, though, it's been different. They've had 17 kids decommit. I think only 2 or 3 have committed elsewhere. So you talk about, a talent infusion, a jump start to a program. There's potentially, a double-digit number of high school recruits that have eyed what James Franklin was going to do. And, hey, maybe you just go down the coast to Blacksburg, Virginia, another historic program, another fantastic home environment. Again, I kind of am left wondering why not Virginia Tech? Why not James Franklin? For Penn State, though, guys, I'm worried about Happy Valley. It really feels like Penn State is going to get left out in the cold, right? You made that reaction. You fired James Franklin, but immediately you start seeing head coaches come off the board. Mike Elko was just extended at Texas A&M. That was the guy. That was supposed to be their guy, according to the message boards, the insiders, that they were going after the local product in Mike Elko. Matt Rule was obviously extended at Nebraska. And now you're kind of, I think, down to, your B tier guys. I don't think that's unfair to say.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But if you hit on the right B tier guy, you win the jackpot, right? Yeah. I think, look at Oregon with Dan Lanning, right? Dan Lanning was a big time defensive coordinator. He didn't have any head coaching experience, and now he's got Oregon as one of the best programs in the country, and they had slipped a little bit under their previous two coaches, under Taggart and Cristobal. So, yeah, I think it's not over for them. They just have to do a really good job of evaluating this tier of candidates, right? Mm-hmm. They can't misstep. They can't hire a guy and have it be a mistake. And the sure things seem like they're starting to fall off the board, but there's still gold that they can pan for, and they just have to find the right guy and make sure it's the right fit.
Yeah, good point. They have to lean into kind of the culture fit, right? They can't go make a sexy hire because that's probably not going to work at this point. I don't know. It might. They might steal a coach from somewhere we don't expect. I mean, that's the beauty of the coaching carousel. But
there's still names out there, Mitch, that will be on the move that we don't even know about yet.
That's true.
That is definitely out there that we have not even, I think, reached anywhere close to the depths of this coaching carousel.
A lot of smoke, a lot of rumors about one job on the 40 acres. I think that might not be as solidified as what it might have seemed, at least per Desmond Howard and a couple other people as well. So,
well, one thing I wanted to bring up on Penn State too is they kind of did this first. I don't think they were the first job to come open, but they were the first bigger program that really got rid of their coach. And then afterwards, it was the LSU's and the Florida started to enter the market. And so I think almost immediately they lost that kind of big name leverage that they had and trying to be first, right? And I get that you wanted to get them out. I think at a certain point the fan base is going to revolt and you were going to have riots and anarchy and everything else in hands. But I do think there is maybe something to be said for the fact that this is the possible worst cycle to have a coaching job open, just because of how much you're probably going to have to overpay for guys, just due to the fact that there's so many big time programs that are up. And you're right. I mean, if other programs come over, if there's another job that comes open, that's a big time job that could leapfrog Penn State again. You just went a little bit further back in the line. It could get messy, right? They're probably going to have to do the let's go find our guy and hope that he's a home run. And that's tough to do.
Certainly can be. One other coaching search I want to get your input on. It's not an official coaching search for Ole Miss, but they have given one Lane Kiffin an ultimatum, guys, which you don't often see publicly talked about. But Lane Kiffin's been flirting with LSU. He's been flirting with Florida. He's been flirting with his own fans. He's been telling his own fans he's in the good old days right now and he's not going anywhere. And yet he's sending private planes full of his family to Gainesville and to Baton Rouge to tour to potential job offers and the campuses there. So Ole Miss came out today and said, Lane, whatever you're going to do, you have to let us know by November 28th. Now, curiously, I didn't actually see what the if then here's what happens was kind of the punchline of it. But I have to imagine, based off the talk and just kind of common sense, if Lane Kiffin does not acquiesce and make a decision whether he's staying or leaving by the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss would probably just make Pete Golding the acting football head coach, right, in the name of stability as they get ready to head into the playoff.
And good for Ole Miss. Can we just start saying there? Sure. This is not a fun position to be in. They are, in all likelihood, unless they stumble in Starkville, going to be 11-1 and hosting a college football playoff game in a few weeks. And they don't need this extra drama in their lives. I'm super proud of Ole Miss in this situation because Lane Kiffin is really taking a situation where a whole locker room is about to play the biggest college football games of their lives. He's making it all about him. It's a selfish move. I get that he has to look out for number one. He has a future to look out for. He's wanted to get back into a big-time coaching role ever since he lost that USC job over almost 20 years ago now, right? But yeah, made you feel old with that one. Sorry. But he is not the only person in this equation, and Ole Miss has every single right to make sure that they're looking out for their best interest as well. So good for Ole Miss. I'm glad that they're doing this, and the timing just doesn't make sense for either party involved. So you've got to take control of the situation. It looks like that's what Ole Miss is doing. Now, I don't know what kind of legal binding nature there is for this ultimatum, if it's just a gentleman's agreement or if there's actual stipulations in his contract that make that necessary, but good for them for doing the best they can to try to get answers as fast as they can.
Well, I've got to imagine that there's some, kind of behavioral clause in most contracts, right? Like, and they're not firing him. I'm sure it wouldn't be a firing. It would be some sort of like active promotion for Pete Golding. I don't know. We're speculating, but Garrett, like on the other hand, you've got all the common sense. It feels like it's on the side of Ole Miss, right? Like objectively looking out for the betterment of their program, for the betterment of the team. We were talking before we hit air. Like, I don't exactly know what to put my finger on for Lane Kiffin's end game, right? Like Mike Elko talked about in his press conference, his extension was all about Texas A&M showing and proving to him that they would commit to building his vision, to funding the way that he wanted to build this program. And that meant taking care of his support staff, right? Like so much so that one of the things that immediately went into effect was that the support staff now bonuses in the same structure that Mike Elko does. Lane Kiffin's not doing that. He's not trying to get an extra bonus for his special teams coach at Ole Miss. Otherwise, I'm going to leave for LSU or Florida. So, like, I can't really make sense of, based on this dance, what Kiffin wants exactly and what his end game is.
It's hard to figure out because the hard thing is, for a little while, I could have understood his point about commitment to the program, right? Because that was the thing that Elko said, was he wanted certain guarantees about the program at A&M, and that's why he ended up signing and staying long-term. Mm-hmm. I've understood some of his complaints, and he seems to complain about the fans about once a season, about them not showing up. Well, that didn't really play out because they just set an attendance record at Ole Miss, and that good for them too, by the way. But man, like I don't understand what the goal is, because if you're looking for commitment to the program, it's hard to beat a place like a Florida or an LSU. And so if that's what you're looking for, if you just want someone who's going to commit to the program and give you everything possible, just leave, right? Like, why are we kind of skating around and trying to kind of help ourselves and keep building Ole Miss unless you think you're not getting the job, unless you think someone else would be the prime candidate? But it sure doesn't seem like that's the case. Sure seems like either Florida or LSU would probably jump at the opportunity to hire Lane Kiffin. So I just, again, like, I don't know, kind of what you were saying, I don't know what the end goal is. What is he trying to accomplish here? Is it that he's waiting for another job to come open and he's just trying to kind of wait and hope that another job can come open so he can take the bigger name? Again, I don't really know what the goal could possibly be, but it sure doesn't make sense. And yeah, like to kind of what Trey was saying, what is the, like, or what? Like, is it like you better tell us by the 28th or else? And it's like, well, or else what? Like, oh, there's going to be consequences. And what are the consequences? Like, what can you actively do to a guy that, like, I get maybe make him the non-active head coach, but I mean, if you're not firing him, you're still paying him, you're just wasting a bunch of money. Like, get him out of there.
Well, and that may, I mean, at that point, that may be the ultimate solution, right?
Leave him in Starkville. Why not?
I kind of get the feeling that if we've reached this point, he's probably not staying, but then again, Lane's surprises at every turn. So we'll see. Would love to know what your thoughts are at 3Tech Pod. Let us know in the comments where you think Lane is the best fit. Is he staying? Is he going? Do you like the James Franklin hire? We'd love to know your opinion on that as well. Guys, let's get into our big three, and let's start with our game of the week out in Eugene. Kind of one of the few games in the Big Ten Conference that's really moved the national needle. I know we've got kind of a storyline on that later, but this one matters quite a bit. This one really determines somebody's season, and I think will go a long way in determining playoff seeding as well. As number 6 Oregon hosts number 16 USC. These rankings are, of course, before the Tuesday night playoff spectacular, so they may change very simply. But guys, a couple of fascinating storylines right off the top. First of all, we talk about this every week that USC goes on the road. Can Lincoln Riley get a must-win game on the road, right? He got that one against Nebraska, albeit against kind of a hobbled Nebraska team, right? Dylan Raiola goes out. Is Dan Lanning what Lincoln Riley has always wanted to be? I think this is an interesting point because Dan Lanning is kind of the young hotshot. He's built this monster at Oregon. He's put his team in a position to succeed. Lincoln Riley, when he left for USC while he was at Oklahoma, very much was that guy. And it's been a lot of disappointment out on the West Coast ever since then, right? USC's really only underachieved. They have a chance to kind of negate both of those narratives this week. And then my final bullet point that I had when I was thinking through this was the way that Oregon won that Iowa game. They kind of had to gut their way through it, right? They really had to guide it towards the finish line, dig deep, find something special to come back and beat the Hawkeyes in the rain on the road. Do they play fast and loose this week after some time to kind of decompress, or do they white knuckle it through a game that has everything to do with their playoff implications? Trey, I'll kick it to you. I mean, this really is a fascinating game that reminds us of the better years of the Pac-10, the Pac-12. Which way are you leaning here?
I'm leaning with USC, actually, because you mentioned Oregon against Iowa, right? And we look at USC, we think of just this flashy program, flash in the pan, no gumption behind them. I think it's a perception that we have from USC, especially going into this year, but I feel like we've been kind of underrating them all season, guys. I know they stubbed their toe against Illinois, obviously have had the setback against Notre Dame as well, but I've been really impressed with the way they've won games in non-ideal circumstances. You thought they'd be out toughed against Michigan. They go run the ball down Michigan's throat and blow them out in LA. The weather is awful at home against Iowa, and they battle against that adversity and find a way. When Iowa, I think, won the success margin or the success rate margin, right? And in that graph that came out today, but they're winning games in non-ideal circumstances. And Oregon has been winning those as well, but I just wonder if we're missing something with Oregon against teams that actually have a chance to push for the playoff this year. We haven't really seen that yet. That Iowa win, not aging the best because of USC and the way that USC beat them as well. Iowa's now a 4-loss team, and that's the best win on Oregon's schedule. But just from a schematic standpoint, I think both of these offenses, they can be at their ceiling some of the best in the game. I give the edge to USC, though. I think they have the better quarterback in Jaden Maiava. He leads the country in QBR. They've been consistent against the better teams on their schedule. They've got Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, one of the best wide receiver tandems in the country. They found a gem in King Miller. Just shocking to get that development as a freshman running back with 7.3 yards per carry. I think this is going to come down to a couple questions, though. I think if USC can take away the pass, like they have been able to do against some lesser passing offenses, it's going to allow them to commit more bodies to the run where they're not as good. They shut down Michigan's run game against a Bryce Underwood who could not throw the ball down the field. If they can take away the pass, or at least make them respect the pass defense a little bit, maybe make Dante Moore a little gun shy with a couple interceptions, that's going to allow them to commit some more bodies to the run. And for me, if Oregon's going to win this one going away, they're going to have to capitalize on the pressure they get. They generate pressure at a 39.6% rate, but that's been converted to just 18 sacks this year. So they're not getting home to the quarterback. They're rushing them a little bit, not getting home. I think USC can take advantage of it. I think both of these offenses are going to put up some points in this one. So give me USC to cover the big number in a game that could be a shootout.
Garrett, this line feels like it might be honestly a little large, right? For the way that we've seen Oregon's offense maybe slow down over the last couple of Big Ten opponents, some tough Big Ten defenses, although I think the Wisconsin result was maybe a little head scratching at home. But Dante Moore got off to a really hot start. He's had some good games mixed in, but maybe hasn't made the headlines that I think some Oregon fans would have preferred that he did, right? 10 interceptions, I believe, on the season. So 10.5, that line shocked me just a little bit, but can Oregon cover that number?
All right, here I go. I'm sticking my neck out for you one more time, Ducks. I'm going to do it one more time. Look, Mitch, we had a conversation before the Iowa game about how I just couldn't believe in them and they weren't getting it done. And, they were winning games, and that's nice, but they weren't really doing it with that killer instinct like we've been used to seeing the Dan Lanning teams. And I still kind of believe that that's true.
And you were right.
And I was right. But that game was kind of ugly and it was like real rainy and like they were snapping the ball over people's heads. And I don't know, like they outrushed them by a whole bunch. So that's kind of nice too. Man, it's hard because I'm trying to talk myself back into this one and I'm going to go ahead and do it. But I'm partially doing this because I just do not trust Lincoln Riley at all. I can't trust him as far as I can throw him. It's a big game. It's a big spot. It's on the road. It's a tough road environment. They already kind of failed their first test of the season at home. You got to think the fans are coming in with some kind of crazy passion or reckless abandon on this one. Whatever they weren't against Indiana feels like they're going to be in this one. I also kind of looked and said, like, well, what's the flow of the game going to have to be in this one? I think USC is going to have to be balanced to get stuff done against that Oregon defense, but they do kind of start slow. They've only scored 10 as their biggest first quarter points in terms of like conference play and beyond. Oregon's beaten that number 3 times, but they've also gone with 2 or fewer points in 3 games too. So for me, a lot of this is going to be how fast can Oregon start, right? How fast can they start? Can they jump out to a lead and put USC in a bad game script, right? Where if they're down, they have to pass their way back into it. It worked against Iowa. They could kind of claw back against Iowa. Don't think they can do that against the Oregon defense. I think Oregon's going to be able to control the game with the run a little bit. I do trust their defense to get this one done at home, as I just kind of mentioned. And look, I know it was just Minnesota. I know. Okay, but they kind of flipped a switch. They locked in. They looked really good. Dante Moore completed 90% of his passes for over 300 yards. The Ducks ran for 179 in addition to that. That's 510, I think, total yards of offense in that. They played really, really well. It makes me nervous sticking my neck out for him again. I can already hear what happens when they get by him by 1 point or, oh man, heaven forbid they lose this game. But give me the balance of the Oregon Ducks. Give me the better team in the Oregon Ducks against a Trojan team that's going to have to play catch up on the road. No rain involved in this one. All right, looking at the forecast, Weather Channel thinks it's going to be 57 and mostly cloudy. That's downright balmy right now at this time of the year in Oregon.
Should be nice, yeah.
It should be a nice day. I think Oregon puts this one away late. Maybe doesn't quite pull away, but I think goes up, 11 or 12 into this game.
Yeah, I think for Trey and I, the stat that stands out is Oregon's success on the ground, right? Like USC is just so bad at defending the run. But then I look at, okay, where was the last time that USC faced a rushing attack that could decimate opponents, right? Trey talked about Michigan. I go back to the Notre Dame game, which they lost by 10 on the road, and Notre Dame ran for a bazillion yards. It was like 307 on the ground. Like they couldn't stop anything. And yet they found a way to only lose that game by 10. And when I look at what USC's offense is actually doing compared to what Indiana did against Oregon a couple of weeks ago, USC's offense is actually more efficient right now and more successful on a play-by-play basis than what Indiana has done. Their second EPA per play, their overall success rate is also ranked second. I think USC can keep up with Oregon. You throw on the fact that Oregon does not have their full complement of pass catchers, right? They got Kenyon Sadiq back this last week against Minnesota, but Gary Bryant Jr. is still out. We haven't seen DeCorian Moore come back quite yet. It's too early in the week to know if those guys are going to play. There hasn't been any sort of announcement on that. But I just wonder if there's enough kind of ticked in favor of USC that they can keep this one close. Now, my hot take for this is I think the loser of this game is out of the college football playoff. For USC, that's pretty obvious, right? But for Oregon, guys, I wonder if this is a Miami situation where if they lose this one at home, that would mean that their 2 hardest games of the season, Notre Dame notwithstanding, which they also, or I'm sorry, not Notre Dame, sorry. Their 2 hardest games of the season, we're talking about Oregon, would have both been at home, and they both would have been losses, right? I don't know what the committee hangs their hat on for Oregon past those two games. They can go win at Washington to end the year, and that would be great. But when it came to the best of the best, these top ranked teams, you'd be 0-2 in those games. And I just don't know that with as many teams from the SEC that are going to be clustered around those last few at large spots, even the Big 12, perhaps, if BYU can win. I think the math might not work in Oregon's favor. So we'll leave that there. We'll see what happens with Oregon. We'll see what happens with USC. Write in. Let us know your thoughts at 3TechPod. We'd love to know which side of the biggest game of the week you guys are taking. Guys, let's move to Pitt at number 15, Georgia Tech. And the Rec is favored by 2.5. 6 p.m. game on ESPN. The odds to win the ACC right now, Trey, this has been your pet cat. Georgia Tech still at plus 175. Pitt all the way down at plus 850. If you listened to Pat Narduzzi last week, that ain't no thing. They've still got everything to play for right in front of them. But guys, Pitt coming in with a bad loss. They got blown out of their own building by Notre Dame, but that was kind of in the metrics, evidently. Georgia Tech really struggled with Boston College. A 2-point win at Chestnut Hill to send Boston College, I think 1-9 is what the Eagles are right now. I don't have a lot of confidence in what Georgia Tech is doing. They're playing up and down to their opponents. Who knows what you're going to kind of get on a week-to-week basis. Like, Trey, does it feel like Georgia Tech's running out of a little bit of steam right now?
It does, and that's why I'm going to take Pitt outright here. I think they get it done on the road in Atlanta and throw a wrench in this ACC race once again. It pains me to say it, guys. I know y'all put me under the wheels of the Ramblin' Wreck multiple times on that graphic, and listen, feel free to do it again if it means Georgia Tech gets their win, and we're all happy about that, happy for Haynes King. But man, I just hate this matchup for Georgia Tech. I think that the 2.5 points is a sign that this is a really even matchup on paper, and Georgia Tech's getting the benefit from home field, obviously, but Georgia Tech's defense is bad right now, guys. In the last 4 games, they've given up 324.8 yards through the air. The last 2 times out, they've allowed 48 and 34 34 was to Boston College, like you mentioned, who was averaging, I think, sub 20, maybe even sub 15 in games against Power 4 competition this year offensively. It hasn't been good, and Pitt's offense is still very good. I know that they did not look good against Notre Dame last week, and I know the final score is going to make this sound crazy. I think my process in picking them was on the right track. They were 0 of 13 on third down. How was I supposed to predict that Notre Dame was going to allow them to go 0 of 13 on third down? That's not going to repeat itself, I don't think, especially against Georgia Tech. But man, the Pitt's offense is still good. I love Mason Heinchel. I think he's going to match up very well against this Georgia Tech defense. And I think the Pitt defense matches up very well with Georgia Tech's offense. Pitt's still top 5 in the country in stopping the run, even after that Notre Dame game. And Georgia Tech really likes to rely on yards after contact in the run game and yards after catch in the passing game. Pitt's top 10 in both of those, but it's stopping both of those defensively. So bad matchup. I don't love it. Georgia Tech kind of, got the win last week. Obviously, it was huge to get escape with that win, but the win's kind of out of their sails right now. So I'll give one more stab before I turn it over to the Georgia Tech lovers on the podcast, the true ones, not the fake one and me apparently. But it's cliche. We all know it's football 101, but third down's going to decide this game, guys. When Pitt has the ball, they are 120th in third down conversions, but Georgia Tech's only 69th in stopping it. Not very nice. And when Georgia Tech has the ball, they're 9th in third down conversions, but Pitt's 27th at stopping. So kind of a good on good matchup there. Whoever wins that battle, probably going to go a long way in deciding who actually wins this one.
Garrett, we've got the engine light is on. We've got low tire pressure. Something's rattling in the back. But we're riding with the Ramblin' Wreck once again. We are driving this thing into the dirt. That line makes me so incredibly nervous. Trey makes a very compelling point. The numbers do not appear to be in our favor, but you got to believe, man.
Yeah, it's at this point for me, for Georgia Tech, it's starting to feel like the Ramblin' Wreck is looking a lot more like the Bluesmobile at the end of Blues Brothers, where you got to say, our mother of blessed acceleration, don't fail me now, right? We got to get to Richard J. Daley Plaza. We got to make sure that we can, mail in the 5,000 to make sure the Penguin can get her rent paid and all that stuff. Like we're at that point with the Ramblin' Wreck where, look, in October they looked fantastic, right? I've got their schedule up right now. They beat Virginia Tech by 15. They went out and beat Duke on the road by 9. Smashed Syracuse. And then the calendar flipped to November. They lose to NC State, and they got a whole bye week to just barely escape BC. What are we doing? And it's starting to feel like everything's coming apart. And if you remember, at the end of that movie, when they park it in that Richard J. Daley Plaza, that whole car falls apart right there. But it got him there. That's the point. It got him there. And Georgia Tech is on a mission from God, and that's the whole point that I've got right now is just it just feels right. It feels like they got to make it. I believe in Haynes King. I'm going to have a really hard time picking against him down the stretch with just the way that he plays the football game. It's just what he does, right? It's a dangerous spot for them. They could be looking ahead to Georgia. They could be, kind of peeking on to next week and getting ready for that game. But for no reason in particular, I'm just going to pick them to rise to the occasion. I think they get it done. I think they cover the 2.5 points. I think they'll win by like a touchdown late. It could just be a tie game where they've got a drive at the very end, and Haynes King finds a way to get it done. I just believe in this team. I think it's a good football team, and I think they're going to do what they need to do to set up the dramatic moment, which will be next week against Georgia.
Yeah, that's the thing is like they play up to their competition just as much as they play down to their competition, right? And they are at home. I love the head ball coach, right? I mean, Brent Key's going to have everybody fired up. If Georgia Tech loses this game, it's not going to be for like lack of focus, right? It's just going to be like the car broke down. They ran out of gas. I'm riding with the Wreck one more time. Let's cruise into Atlanta for a rivalry game against Georgia. Let's go to the ACC championship game. Yeah, X's and O's, not in a great spot right now, but you do have Haynes King, and I believe in the man under center. 807 rushing yards to his credit so far this season. It would take a Herculean effort, but we've seen it from him before to get back to 1,000 yards. Jaden Daniels obviously did that in 2023 during his Heisman season. Before that, you have to go all the way back to 2016, 2017 to find Lamar Jackson, who ran for over 1,000 yards as a quarterback, because of course in college sack yardage is counted against those. So it's just been, a wonderful run as quarterback at Georgia Tech. I want to see Haynes go out with a championship. So I'm going to believe until that dream's dead. I'm going to take Georgia Tech to win this game as well.
Shun the non-believers, Mitch.
Listen, I might have to get back in Canvas, see what we can whip up if we end up being right. Final
ACC
game.
title scenarios, guys, just there real quick. Georgia Tech is in with a win. They are at the mercy of the tiebreaker gods and need to root for some other teams next week if they lose. Pitt, if they win, they're in a good spot, but not necessarily guaranteed at this point, because there's some other teams that could win and knock them out in a tiebreaker.
And they've still got to play Miami.
They still have to play Miami.
They still have to play Miami.
Hopefully they load it up on hot dogs. Need those hot dogs at the turn.
Glizzy at the turn. Final game to dive deeply into. And I mean, we can go over this one a little bit quicker, I think, because this game centers around the line for me, guys. We're talking about number 11 BYU at Cincinnati, 7 p.m. game on Fox. The line is 2.5 in favor of BYU, who just got done shellacking TCU at home at night. Admittedly, a different environment. They are way better at night at home. Cincinnati, though, they came off a bye, and all they did was throw for like 150 yards against a really bad defense for Arizona and lose that game outright. They made Trey look like a genius over the weekend when I could not see that one getting home.
You say that like you're surprised. What the heck?
Not in general. I think you've been the most accurate out of all of us this year. But that game specifically, I could not get Arizona even to covering that game. And then they went outright. I lost 2 of my best bets outright last week. That was
bear down.
Not a great look for me, guys. This line stinks to high heavens. I don't get it. Cincinnati is better at home, but then you let Arizona, who barely beat Kansas and looked kind of awful while doing it, walk in and essentially ruin your season, right? I mean, Cincinnati can still, they've got what, 3 losses. So, I mean, hypothetically they could finish 9-3, a great year for Scott Satterfield, a definite stock up, but you had everything to play for right in front of you and you couldn't get up for Arizona. But I'm going to take Cincinnati plus the 2.5, man. Like I can't wrap my head around it. It does not make sense. BYU, I think, is a vastly superior team. BYU has a top scoring defense. They're 41st in run defense is maybe why Cincinnati has a better shot here. Maybe Evan Pryor comes back this week and Cincinnati has been doing really well on the ground. But Sorsby was putrid last week. 154 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. I don't get it from the X's and O's standpoint, but when a line reeks that badly, I guess I'll lean into it.
Yeah, I'm going to BYU minus 2.5. I think they're the better team. I think
good for you.
Bear Bachmeier just seems to have the winning gene, and please pay no attention to the results in Lubbock behind the curtain. I have nothing to say about that, but
they're a good football team.
Yeah, no, I think that they're a better team. I think LJ Martin continuing to kind of come back off the injury, right? He had a brief injury a couple games ago, hasn't really been 100%. I think he's kind of coming back from that, starting to play a little bit better, get back into form. It's a great running combo. I think they'll be able to run to kind of pass a little bit too. Bachmeier hasn't always been great throwing the football, but I think there's some opportunities here that he can throw the football a little bit better. And look, I think Cincinnati's just running out of steam a little bit. They've had a good year, but BYU is the better team. I think they're going to show it. They need to make a statement. I kind of mentioned that off the top, is that there's going to be some teams that need to make statements to convince the committee to let them in. Well, if BYU goes and just, smacks Cincinnati in the face, that's a good statement, right? That's a good Cincinnati team that you could get in there, win a big time game. Defense travels, running the football travels, and BYU is going to need to travel. And to just kind of cap that one off, if it is really 7 p.m. on Fox, you could go check out Always Talking Ball for their take on the whole BYU Vampire team. And I think that'll probably help you go a little ways there. So go check out our friends when you're done watching this one, because, they have a pretty good take about BYU being very good at nighttime.
They are.
That's a good point that I had not considered in this one. I literally have undecided written next to my name here, guys, and I was going to let y'all.
Maybe the most fair take so far.
I was just going to.
This one.
I'm not abstaining. I'm going to make a pick here, but I just wanted to stall and not commit and let you guys kind of make the point on both sides. And I was just going to see where the spirit led me as I make this final pick here in the Big Three. But yeah, you guys are right about the Vampire thing. BYU's also generally won on the road outright, but it's been close, right? They only won by 3 at Colorado. It was 6 in double overtime at Arizona. They did run away from Iowa State, but then lost by 22 at Tech. So as they took the step up in competition on the road, it was not as pretty for them. So to me, this one's going to come down to 2 things. Can Bear Bachmeier win this game with his arm is number 1, because Cincinnati's 102nd in defensive success rate against the pass. He did step it up against Iowa State when he had to, when LJ Martin first went down. He looked really good against a bad TCU secondary last week at home, but not so much against Tech, right? That's kind of the other game where the run game was taken away from BYU. And obviously Tech is a big step up in defense, but can Bear Bachmeier win this game with his arm? Because Cincinnati's pretty good against the run, really bad against the pass. He has to exploit that mismatch. And does Evan Pryor play? You mentioned it, Mitch, but Cincinnati is 0-2 without Evan Pryor in these last 2 games against Utah and Arizona. 7-1 with him. It's a completely different offense. It's a completely different team with their best offensive player. So that being said, I guess I should make a pick. I'm going to lean Cincinnati plus the 2.5. And that means I'm lining up with Mitch here, who's on a bit of a cold streak, and I recognize that. Maybe I can pass some good energy on, but I don't think the Big 12's done with chaos yet, guys. I think it is too straightforward for the Big 12 to have 2 one-loss teams going into the final week. And we just say that those 2 teams are going to make it to Arlington. We're not going to have a silly tiebreaker scenario. That is not what this conference was. Yeah, that is not what this conference was founded on. That is not what it stands for. And I don't think Cincinnati's going to let it get away from its identity.
I think Cincinnati is the blue shell on the Mario Brothers Fury Road here for BYU. They're just, you get to the finish line, you think you're home free, and suddenly you're in 8th place. Like, that would be so Big 12 for that to happen. The line seems to indicate that that might be on the cards. It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I want to lean BYU so wholeheartedly here, but I'm going to take Cincinnati.
Well, look, the blue shell hits the guy in first place, so the folks over in Lubbock better look out. And also, just another thing, I'm just going to speak directly. Hey, BYU fans, me and you, I know you're watching this video because y'all been so good to us this month. Go tell them in the comments why they're wrong and we're awesome, okay? I'm riding with y'all. We're going to keep going. There's no reason why BYU should lose this game. Come on, let's get it done.
There's not. There's really not.
There's really not. It's just the college football chaos theory and the weird line. And I will say, yes, the shell does usually go to first place, but Tech is on a bye this week. So I think that would mean, here we go, if a blue shell is being deployed.
Transitive property.
We have some real things to figure out. This is like the controller disconnecting and all of that. So we gotta go maybe run the simulation in Mario and see what happens when the blue shell goes off.
The Big 12 nerds yearn to use the algorithm, and if BYU wins this weekend, they don't get to do that. So I think chaos will reign. We'll see. Let us know at 3TechPod. All right, guys, our slept on game of the week presented by Best Sleep today. Some really life-changing stuff happening over at Best Sleep today. If you can't sleep with a CPAP, you're not wanting to do oral surgery, but you just stop breathing at night. Dr. Mason, the folks over at Best Sleep today, are getting that fixed with a simple oral appliance. BestSleepToday.com to learn more. Washington State, Wazoo, at number 21, James Madison. The Dukes are 13.5-point favorites, and they're lined up, guys, to have a great shot to claim this G5 spot, this fifth conference championship spot, however you want to phrase it. The Dukes have played very, very good football this year. Outside of that loss to Louisville, which is their only blemish so far, they've looked the part, and they've really looked the part in second halves. They've crushed the will to survive for most of their opponents in that second half. And now they're welcoming a Washington State team that's desperate just to get to a bowl game in 2025. They come in at 5-5. They've got Oregon State on deck next week in their season finale. But of course, they lost the first leg of that not back to back, but the home and home series against Oregon State in the Pac-2. So Trey, you've kind of been orchestrating a lot of the G5 math. You've been paying attention to James Madison. We've had a lot of conversations about that. Is this a statement for James Madison, or is this a landmine that continues to open up that G5 race?
That's a fantastic question, because you think back over the last couple of years, James Madison has looked really good, and then the spotlight kind of gets shined on him a little bit, and they fall back a little bit. I'm thinking of the game day game when App State came to town a couple years ago. They've had some shots against power conference opponents and been close, but not really gotten the job done. And on the other side of that, the interesting side narrative is this is a direct comparison game for the committee against a team that they could be up against, North Texas, the kind of the co-favorite right now to get that G5 bid. Also played Washington State earlier this year, also at home. They beat the Cougars 59-10 in Denton, guys, back in September. That was kind of the arrival, the statement. Yeah, it was a thumping up I-35 there. And it was kind of the statement that UNT had arrived this year, right? But listen, if you haven't watched a ton of JMU this year, I don't blame you. They kind of been buried on ESPN Plus a lot. They've won 8 straight by an average of 23.5. They've won by 32 points per game in their last 4. They are destroying everybody in their path in the Sun Belt East. They've already clinched the Sun Belt East title this year. And this big resurgence has kind of been on the back of Alonzo Bennett getting more of the full-time reps at quarterback. They were kind of splitting with Matthew Saluka at first. If you remember the Louisville game, that was kind of some of the controversy, right? They didn't really know how to handle their quarterback situation. Well, Barnett stepped up and become one of the best dual threat guys in the country. He's got almost 2,500 total yards, 28 total touchdowns already this year. He's got a great all-purpose back in Wayne Knight, who has over 1,200 yards from scrimmage already this year. Their defense is number 1 in the country in success rate. And Wazoo, guys, I know they're fighting for a bowl game. They've had some good, hard-fought wins this year. It's a big start over after Jake Dickert left them and went to the opposite coast. But they're just not really particularly good at anything, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They haven't eclipsed 30 points except for one time this year, back in like week 2. So I think this is a situation, you put it all together, James Madison needs to make a statement I think they will. I think they're going to cover the spread. I think they're going to try to win by as many points as possible, a true leave the starters in as long as you can situation, and try to win this one going away, because they're going to need to, as they're compared to that champion of the American, if they get that far.
Yeah, I was going to try to come in here and make some kind of a case about why this one would get close and, why maybe Washington State's going to get in here and make it a game. But then I just decided to make my second John Belushi movie quote reference of the night and say, forget it, they're rolling. It's just a lot of fun. I like to watch this team. I like them playing big. I think they win big. This is another big case of like big motivation and a good team, and then just low vibes on the other side. I think they're going to win big. I got them covering. The big thing will be kind of comparing it to the game that UNT played, since those could be, big time, kind of comparison points for the committee. Can they beat them 59-10? They probably can. Just will they? What are they going to end up doing? How much are they going to press hard on the gas pedal? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Can you imagine a 12-1 North Texas conference champion, a 12-1 James Madison conference champion, and in the committee room at the Gaylord, they're going, well, I guess this comes down to how badly they beat Washington State. I mean, boy, what a way for Old Crimson to be featured on a selection show.
For the people that say every game doesn't matter anymore, like between that and the tiebreakers for conference championship games, every game does matter to somebody at some point.
Yeah, I'm going to roll with JMU as well. I just think they're a much more complete team. That, and the adjustments that they make in the second half are impressive. They're just not giving up that many points when you come out of the break. So I think it's kind of Washington State in the first half, or maybe nothing at all. So I'll take JMU by 2 touchdowns. Let's go around the conferences here to finish out our Week 13 preview. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hit like, hit subscribe wherever you're listening, watching this show. We really do appreciate the Jimmies and the Joes continuing to jump on board. Stay with us all throughout this season. It's been a blast with you guys. Trey, your pet cat has been the ACC this year. That has been your baby, your darling. It's gotten a little bit clearer, I feel like, but there's still plenty of room for chaos. So turn the chalkboard over to you.
Yeah, not as fun with the dream of a 4 or 5 loss Duke potentially winning the league. They're still alive. Don't get me wrong. They're still alive sitting there at 4-2, but it was a bad loss to Virginia. They got smoked by Virginia. Great win by Virginia, if we want to frame that positively. But in the standings here, you've got 4 one-loss teams. We talked about Georgia Tech and Pitt already earlier in this episode, but Virginia is also 6-1. They close with a game against Virginia Tech. Next week, they're off this week. And SMU is 5-1. So as you start to map it out, I won't go too deep in the weeds here on these tiebreaker scenarios, but if the chalk holds, right, if Georgia Tech's able to win as a favored team at home, Virginia beats Virginia Tech, it's going to be those two in Charlotte, with SMU, unfortunately, losing out probably on a three-way tiebreaker with those teams, even if they win out. But just to illustrate that every game matters, if it's a 3-way tie, it could literally come down to the winner of Wake Forest versus Duke next week to determine if Virginia is in the conference championship game or if SMU is in the conference championship game. I played around with the tiebreakers a lot. I'm like 99% sure Georgia Tech clinches a spot if they win this week because of how the tiebreakers play out. But I'm always open to being wrong with the math if somebody finds something different.
When Georgia Tech wins this weekend, I think is what you mean. Boy, and we're to the point where we're just locking up the ACC as a one big league, right? Is that right?
Miami's interesting. Miami's really interesting because if teams keep losing in front of them, they don't have to play that conference championship week. If they're sitting there at 10-2, especially compared against, I think Notre Dame is in unless they stub their toe in just a fantastical fashion over these last couple weeks against Syracuse or Stanford. But
which late night game against Stanford on the road in the season finale, it's like what, 10:30 body clock time is when they're kicking off. We'll
talk about that one in a second. That one's or next week. That one's going to be interesting because it's Syracuse this week. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of conversations in that room, I think, and a lot of pressure from outside that room about that week 1 result and how much weight it should carry if both of them are 10-2.
Okay. Well, so let's talk Miami. They're 17.5-point favorites at Virginia Tech. You've got Louisville at SMU this week. That's kind of a sneaky good game here in Dallas. Those are the two big conference games of note. I'll let you kind of run down the other two, but do you have a leaning for Miami covering at Virginia Tech and then SMU, Louisville, an outright winner?
There really shouldn't be an excuse for Miami to not cover against Virginia Tech. I know it's on the road, but it's a Virginia Tech team that obviously they're probably going to be hyped up with hiring James Franklin. There's probably going to be a lot of energy in that place, maybe a little nervous energy, maybe some guys trying to prove that they belong on the new roster with the new coach, right? Before he gets in there and gets his guys. But Miami's just such a better team. And Virginia Tech, it feels like when they do sneak up and get somebody, it's a way more flawed team than what Miami is this year. Miami has their flaws, but Virginia Tech isn't really competing with teams close to the caliber of Miami this year. So I think they get it done on the road. I also like SMU. Louisville is reeling right now. And I don't think that going to Dallas for the final home game of the year for the Ponies is the place to find your momentum. So I like SMU there. I like them to stay alive in that race for one more week.
Yeah, Garrett, SMU -3.5, small number at home. We saw them beat Miami, I think was the last time that they were at home. Maybe, I can't remember if they had a home game since then, but kind of feels like we're in lock territory with as tough as Louisville has looked the last couple of weeks. And, SMU's just been quietly playing good football.
Yeah, you don't almost have to ask me about SMU. All you have to do is remind me what I watched last Friday night when Louisville played maybe the ugliest close to a football game. We talked about that a little bit on the live show. That was disgusting. I just had to kind of rant about it for a second on the live show because they made me watch that football. And I know that we say that all football is good football, but that was the first time I really started to question if that was true because that was ugly as sin. That was awful. And so, yeah, it's going to be hard to kind of use enough mouthwash to get that taste out of my mouth for what Louisville did. So I'm probably rolling with the Ponies until they prove they can not duck hook a field goal 40 yards left.
Yeah, some bad college kicker moments for sure. Oof. Yeah, I'll lock up SMU -3.5. Sorry, Ponies. Congratulations to Louisville when you went on the road. I think Miami minus that number is also probably the best bet. Yeah, Trey, you've got here in the notes, Wake is hosting a Delaware team that just lost inexplicably to Sam Houston State. The path to 9-3, Wake Forest is there, and I know you made the case for them to getting to a bowl game. 9-3 belongs in the video game, not real life. But here we are.
Listen, you need to talk to your kids about 9-3 Wake Forest. My son doesn't understand English yet, but I've had a conversation with him about the dangers of a 9-3 Wake Forest and what that means Spanish for our national security.
You've got Notre Dame minus a gigantic number against Syracuse. Duke getting 6 in the hook at UNC. Furman's at Clemson. We don't care about that. The big game, Cal, 2.5-point favorites at Stanford on the road.
Small line. That's a very small
number.
line.
That's a very small number for a Cal team that's done some nice things this year. Yeah, watch this space for sure. That should be interesting. The SEC is the boring week. We've got the much maligned cupcake week. Listen, Texas A&M, they've got Jimbo's old school and Samford coming to town. Jimbo lined up I think it was a $750,000 payday for his alma mater while he was still here. I don't know if they maybe contribute matching funds to him or if he'll even be in attendance. His son, Ethan, is a freshman kicker on that football team, so we might see a Fisher get into that game. Georgia's done with SEC play. They play Charlotte for the first time ever. I think they're like 40-point favorites against the 49ers, so play that at your own peril. Ole Miss is on
the only thing notable about that Charlotte game, Mitch, is just an awareness that Charlotte is not an FCS program. They've been lumped in with FCS teams by SEC haters all week, and their fan base has risen up and said, hey, we are not an FCS program. We may play like one, but we are not an FCS program. We are a proud member of the American Conference.
We will take our correct designation, sir, and our beating along with that between the hedges. Alabama plays. That's right. Alabama plays the Fighting Tony Romos in Eastern Illinois. There's the SEC really takes the 4 next week in rivalry week. There's not a single place in Atlanta that's been determined yet. Even though Texas A&M is about to be 11-0 marching into Austin, They're not confirmed into the SEC championship game. Alabama's still alive. Georgia's still alive. Ole Miss needs some help, but they're still alive. So it's kind of wild in the SEC. We'll get more into that, I think, next week as those games actually matter. Missouri at Oklahoma, though, is a good one. Garrett, I'll start with you here. Beau Pribula warmed up last week, and today, CBS Sports on 3, all the publications started saying, hello, Beau Pribula might be playing this week against Oklahoma. I tweeted this out earlier this morning, Monday morning. As soon as everybody's kind of anointing Oklahoma, welcome back to the playoff discussion. You beat Alabama on the road. Congratulations. You're a real team. You've solved all your questions that we had of you. Here comes Missouri to town, who just ran for over 300. Ahmad Hardy did 300 by himself against Mississippi State. Matt Zollers looked competent. And suddenly you might have QB1 back. This feels like a really shaky, nervous spot, I feel like, for Oklahoma at the Palace.
It sure could be. I think, number one, what you just said, the fact that it's at home is going to be a big deal for Oklahoma, getting to kind of get behind your fans. And whether Pribula plays or not, I don't think he'll be at 100%. And he was already kind of starting to look a little bit shaky the last couple games that he did play, especially when it came to throwing the football. So you give me that against an Oklahoma defense that I just saw kind of whoop Bama around for a little bit. Most of the production that Bama had in the game was in the second quarter, and then Oklahoma kind of just tightened it right back up and did what they needed to do. I think this is a really good Oklahoma defense. It's dangerous on the defensive side. They can shut down just about anybody. And there's also a little under the radar factor here, which is that there's not a lot of love lost in this one. There's a lot of hate on both sides of this one. A lot of Oklahoma fans, a lot of Missouri fans ready to just kind of jaw back and forth at each other in this one. So give it a little bit of stakes, give it a little bit of intensity. I still like Oklahoma to win this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, very historic rivalry dating back to the Big 8 days, pre-Big 12, way back in history there. So good calling that out, Garrett. This is the first home game in almost a month for Oklahoma. It feels like all of the SEC relative newcomers have struggled with that this year. So a big-time homecoming opportunity. But listen, we saw that with Texas A&M last week, and the crowd definitely helped will A&M to a second-half comeback, but it was not a fun homecoming against a much worse South Carolina team. So there's a lot to like about Missouri here. I think I'm going to lean Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's given me enough to trust, but do not sleep on Missouri here. This is a better defense than the one Oklahoma faced last week against Alabama, and they can shut down that Oklahoma offense. And I got to wonder if Oklahoma can survive another game like they played in these last two against Tennessee and Alabama. If they have a negative success rate, right? If they're relying on big turnovers, if they are getting outgained by almost 200 yards again, which I don't know that the Missouri offense can do that against this Oklahoma defense, but if they're playing catch up from an offensive perspective all game, I don't know. Sometimes that's going to catch up with you, and it might catch up with them here.
They need to rely on the kicking foot and the 5-inch inseam of Tate Sandell. That's what they need to rely on, because that kid, again, I will continue to stomp my foot for this one. This kid's got aura. I love everything about his game, and I just think that's incredible what he's doing. So they need to rely on that. Just go kick 5 or 6 field goals and get out of there with the dub.
It's getting shorter by the week. Elsewhere in the SEC, Kentucky's fighting for bowl eligibility. They're at number 12 Vanderbilt. Alabama fans are actually rooting for Kentucky to win this game so that they don't have to go to the SEC championship. They want to go 10-2, miss the SEC championship game in all likelihood, and still sneak into the playoffs, which I think is a hilarious spot to be. I mean, whomst among us has not wanted to avoid a potential loss in that championship game? But it is something that I've heard Alabama fans talking about in many of the Alabama outlets. Beat writers are trying to dream up that scenario where they don't have to go to Atlanta, risk that third loss, and still get into the playoff. Arkansas is at Texas. Texas only 10.5-point favorites against the Hogs. And then Tennessee and Florida play their rivalry game. Tennessee is a 3.5-point favorite in the Swamp to take on the Gators. To the Big Ten. And Trey, I know you've been waiting to talk about this as well. For all the trash talk and slander that comes towards the SEC for this week in November, the Big Ten schedule is not much better.
No, it's not. And this is from Brooks Austin. You might know him as the Film Guy. Great channel. Definitely go subscribe to him if you want amazing breakdown of films. we just wrapped up week 12. This is him on his Twitter on Saturday night, I believe, or Sunday morning. And the Big Ten has given us 2 meaningful football games all season in conference. Oregon at Penn State and Indiana at Oregon. We'll get USC at Oregon this week. We'll get Ohio State at Michigan next week. But an 18-team conference has a 4-game schedule, guys. Just to supplement that a little bit more, Chris Felicia, the Bear, tweeted this out, top 40 Sagarin wins from a Sagarin rating perspective. Texas A&M at the top with 7. Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss have 6. Oklahoma has 5. You have to go all the way down to 4 to find your first Big Ten teams with Indiana and Ohio State. It just goes to show you that all these people complaining about the SEC having a bye week, I get the timing of it. I get that, the argument is it's a benefit to have scheduling that in November is an off week. I get it. Number one, no one's stopping you and your conference office from doing that. Like, you're making yourselves work harder. And number two, are you mad that they're playing the same number of big games? Like, your conference bellwether didn't even play a marquee out of conference game, and they get to play teams like Purdue in rivalry week at the end of November. So forgive us down south for wondering what all the hubbub is about when we schedule some off games in late November to give our bodies a little bit of a break from the SEC grind. That is an actual thing, guys.
And Trey, exactly to that point. They talk about in the Big Ten homers that don't want to acknowledge that the SEC is even a good football conference. They talk about how this is just like a simulated bye week and how it's so embarrassing that you would do this at the end of the season. And I would sure hope that your teams are playing tough teams this week. Ohio State plays Rutgers. I guess they're okay. Indiana is on a bye. They don't play this week. I would much rather be on a bye than play Samford or Charlotte, because that's not a game. There's a 0% chance you lose. I know that A&M's like a 99% chance
or
to
get
win
injured.
I'm sorry.
No one from Indiana, knock on wood, for practice stuff, but no one at Indiana is getting hurt this week.
Right. Like, nobody's getting injured. Everyone's going to be just fine. And all the stat comparisons are, just kind of politely ignoring the fact that Indiana's played an extra game. And so all this extra yardage on top for the Heisman conversation and everything else, that's an extra game and all there too. So look, I think that it's fair, and I'm not an SEC homer, right? I don't think that the SEC is just miles ahead of the Big Ten. I think that they're both very good football conferences with very good teams, and I think that if you go undefeated or if you have one loss in that conference, you should be very, very happy with yourself for how you've played. I just kind of think that doesn't get reciprocated both directions. And to make fun of people for playing tough games at the end, guys, y'all know that means that like the conference just starts playing their games earlier, right? Like I know that's a whole 9-game versus 8-game thing, but like, that there were like conference games in the SEC week 3. Like, that's how that works. They're just not playing the easy teams at the beginning of the year too. It's I get it, and the SEC will be going to 9 conference games, and then
Next
at that
season.
point, I want to hear everybody shut up, because you lost every right to talk about it at that point, especially if you're going to keep putting Indiana on a bye week at the end of the season. I'm just not going to hear it.
Last thing on this, Mitch, unless you want to jump in, but it's not us saying that the Big Ten is an awful conference, right? Like, the Big Ten is obviously the second best conference from top to bottom. And it's also not saying that Ohio State and Indiana wouldn't probably have a good shot at winning the SEC. I think they'd be more challenged than they are in the Big Ten, because someone could jump up and give them a scare that they're not receiving. But it's been hilarious this week to watch the Big Ten homers tie themselves in knots and start to reference the exact same arguments that SEC homers reference in regards to Penn State and their blue chip ratio. And it's like, oh yeah, wait a second. The entire SEC is in the top 30 of the blue chip ratio. The entire SEC is in the top 50 of the Sagarin rankings, and all but one of them are in the top 40. So yeah, it's a tougher league top to bottom, and it's more likely you're going to play close games, even if you're a really good team. I digress.
And Trey, that was exactly the point about the whole A&M comeback versus Indiana comeback. And I'm really curious to see how the committee treats that, because the point that Indiana had was, well, hey, I know that Penn State's 3-6, but that's still a talented roster. And yeah, they maybe don't have their head coach anymore, but that's a good team. And I'm like, yeah, they're 3-6. You know who else is 3-6 was South Carolina when they came in there to A&M and then put up a bunch of points and forced a miracle comeback. So, like, as long as we're going to keep the same energy, right? If you thought that the Indiana comeback was a big deal, great. You better think the same thing about Texas A&M. And if you wanted to, bash Indiana over the head for it, then yeah, go ahead, bash A&M over the head for it. That's fine. You just got to keep the same energy because it is the exact same thing.
All right. Well, I'm gonna call it right there. We'll move on from the Big Ten. We'll let the
Big Ten
Big
people,
Ten
we
faithful,
love you. Please still listen to us, but come get your boys on Twitter that are just being brain dead. That's all I'll say.
There have been some.
They're
funny,
both good. The SEC and Big Ten drama is just the literal definition of ladies, you're both pretty. Like, that's the perfect time to say that they're both really good football conferences. Just shut up and let it play out, right? At the end of the season, there'll be some undefeated teams. We can argue over who should get the 1 seed or the 2 seed at the very end of it, but come on, just stop.
Well, we've got to fill the 6 days between Saturdays somehow, right? So that's how they do it. All right, quickly, and I'm talking like lightning pace through the rest of it. The Big 12 standings update. You've obviously got Texas Tech at the top. They're on a bye week too. Ironically, they'll take on West Virginia next week. BYU is at 6-1. Utah, Houston, Arizona State, Cincinnati, all at 5-2 in the conference. We'll circle back on the tiebreakers if like Cincinnati beats BYU. The games in action, K-State is at Utah, who's getting a massive number, 17.5 points in favor of the Utes. The committee would love a shellacking for Utah because they're just all over Utah right now. Houston getting a small number against TCU. They're at home this week, and Arizona State goes to Colorado. That's a smaller number than I would have thought. Arizona State getting just 7.5 on the road. That Colorado looks completely lifeless.
It's still Jeff Sims, though. Jeff Sims can make a really good team be really close with a really bad team, like he did last week against West Virginia.
Well, that's very true. Kansas and Iowa State's also playing. Kansas, needs this one to get to a bowl game. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Baylor, Arizona, could be an offensive bonanza. Shout out to Noah Fifita, by the way, who just became the all-time leader last week in passing yards for Arizona. So congratulations to him. And then the G5. Trey, you put these notes together. If you want to speed run these, I'll kick it to you.
Got it. So we talked about the American a little bit earlier, but Navy's 6-1. They're off this week. Their last conference game is Thanksgiving night at Memphis. So if they win, they're in a good spot. We got 5-1, Tulane, North Texas, and ECU. All three of those teams have a tricky road game this week, guys. ECU, 2.5-point favorites at Meat Nation, Triangle of Toughness. We know how tough it is to win there. Just ask Tulane from a few weeks ago. Tulane's 8.5-point favorites at Temple, with the Owls fighting for bowl eligibility in that one. And UNT coming down to H-Town to take on Rice, and the Owls are fighting for bowl eligibility in that one as well. So a couple of fighting Owls trying to get bowl eligible. All three of those are tricky, guys. I don't think that those are going to be runaway games for any of them, especially East Carolina coming to UTSA. But like I've said a couple times, this is the most interesting conference because we won't know who wins tiebreakers until Sunday. That's when they're going to release. Sunday after rivalry week is when they're going to release the results of the computer rankings. At least that's what they've told us in the past. But one other game in the American is UConn at FAU. Just want to shout out UConn real quick. Yeah. Great story from the Huskies. They're fighting for 9-3. This is their last regular season game, so they could have a 9-win season under Jim Mora. That would be awesome. In the Sun Belt, JMU has already locked up the East. Southern Miss, if they win and get a Troy loss this week, they lock up the West, but Troy's playing 1-9 Georgia State, so that's probably going to come down to those two playing each other next week. We love how that's set up. And then Arkansas State's kind of hanging around there too. They need to tie with Troy in the standings. They lost the tiebreaker already to Southern Miss. In Conference USA, we've got 3 teams playing for 2 spots because Missouri State, while they are 5-1 in league play, they are not eligible for the conference championship in their transition year. Stupid rule, but is what it is. They're appealing it. It would be unprecedented for them to win that appeal. Jacksonville State, I should say, is undefeated in league play. They're at FIU this week, and then they host Western Kentucky, who is 6-1 and has their last league play in the game next week at Jack State. And then Kennesaw is hanging around as well. They're 5-1. They play Missouri State this week, and then they're at Liberty next week, but they already have a loss to Jacksonville State that could hurt them in some tiebreaker scenarios. And then finally, we'll talk about the MAC on Saturday, guys, because it's all midweek. They're playing these games before or right after we're recording this, so we don't know results yet. We'll give you an update on Saturday. But in the Mountain West, San Diego State's 5-1. They have the inside track, but a very tricky close against San Jose State and at New Mexico. And then it's just chaos behind them at 4-2. There are 5 teams currently tied at 4-2. If you're looking for some Friday night entertainment, 2 of those teams are playing each other. It's Hawaii at UNLV. That'll eliminate the loser, but it's going to be a fantastic game on Friday night. So there's your G5 update.
Love that. San Diego State, man, before the year, I think we were penciling that game against San Jose State as maybe one of the classics, and then San Jose State has just fallen apart this year. I think they fired a couple of coordinators. I don't remember which ones off the top of my head, but they lost 55-10 to Nevada last week. So suddenly the Ken Niumatalolo experiment, as high as that was last year, boy, it's crashed and burned this year. But excited to see how all of these conferences, Mountain West, I think is a good one specifically to keep your eyes on. And of course we get MACtion as well here in the midweek, final week of MACtion. Yeah.
No, we have some next week too. I think. Do we not?
Okay. I thought
I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong on that.
Anyway, enjoy it while we have it. That's for sure. Well, let's wrap it right there. Long week 13 preview. We're excited. Rivalry week up next. We'll have the live show on Saturday night, or I should say Trey and Garrett will have the live show. I'm unfortunately out again next Saturday, but really, really excited to get to the end of this regular season. It's been a chaotic one. It's been a topsy-turvy one. Rivalry week feels like it's going to be an absolute classic this year, and then we move into conference championships and the playoff. It's insane how fast this season has gone. But for Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Saturday night, so long, everybody.